The courtroom was engulfed in a heavy silence, broken only by the faint tapping of a pen on the judge's desk. All eyes were fixed on Ethan Blake, a man with a weary demeanor and bloodshot eyes. He stood there, his hands tightly cuffed, the old uniform of the police force now a mere remnant of a pride that had been trampled. Guilty, the judge's voice rang out, decisive as a blade slicing through the air. Ethan heard every word clearly, but it felt as though his heart had stopped beating. He turned his head, his gaze searching for a familiar face among the audience. Only Maximus, his loyal canine dog, was growling, struggling against its leash. Max tugged so hard that the handler had to drag it away. "Max!" Ethan called, his voice hoarse. Max turned back, its eyes blazing as if shouting. "What did we do wrong?" Victor Crane, the deputy chief of police, sat in the back row, a cold smile curling on his lips. "Blake, you brought this upon yourself. A fool who lives by ideals will always be an easy prey." Ethan didn't respond. He merely bowed his head, feeling his heart constrict painfully. What did I do to deserve this, he wondered. I just wanted to do what was right, to protect others. Yet it was those I trusted who pushed me into this hell. As Max was dragged out of the room, Ethan shut his eyes tightly, holding back the bitter tears. "Max, I promise I'll come back. I promise I'll save you, even if it costs me everything." The courtroom doors closed. Ethan was dragged away, leaving behind a silent but resolute vow. Darkness enveloped the central prison where Ethan was being held. The cramped room with its cold concrete walls seemed to suffocate him every second. Ethan sat on the old iron bed, his eyes staring blankly at the floor. Everything seemed to have collapsed. Max's barking still echoed in his mind, like an endless cry for help. "I'll let you down, Max. I couldn't protect you." Ethan blamed himself, the pain inside him like a storm that couldn't be extinguished. Suddenly, a clicking sound came from outside the door. Ethan looked up to see the guard entering with a tray of food. The guard set the tray down, glanced around, then leaned down and whispered, "Ethan, we don't believe you did it. Someone wants to silence you. Here." The guard quietly slipped a small piece of paper into Ethan's hand. He unfolded it and read the shaky handwriting. "Go to the abandoned warehouse in the east. The truth awaits you there. Trust no one but yourself." Ethan clenched the paper in his hand. A glimmer of hope pierced through the darkness. That night, in the suffocating darkness, Ethan knew he had only one chance. With the guard's help, he stealthily made his way through the dim hallways of the prison. Each step matched the pounding of his heart. "Don't stop," he told himself, his eyes scanning the surroundings, trying to avoid every security camera. Finally, he reached the back emergency exit. A truck was waiting, driven by the guard. "Hurry up," the guard said urgently. Ethan jumped in, and the door shut just as the alarm blared behind them. The truck stopped at the edge of the forest, where the path led to the abandoned warehouse. Ethan stepped out and turned to the guard. "Thank you. I won't forget this." "Just prove your innocence," the guard replied before speeding off into the night. Ethan stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath before moving forward. The cold wind cut into his skin, but it didn't matter. He had to uncover the truth. The abandoned warehouse loomed in the darkness, its weathered walls and rusted metal roof painting a desolate scene. Ethan cautiously stepped inside, his eyes warily scanning the space. "Is anyone here?" he called softly, his voice echoing in the empty expanse. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from behind. Ethan spun around, gripping a metal rod he had picked up along the way. "Stop!" he shouted. A woman emerged from the shadows, her hands raised. It was Ava Harper, the famous investigative journalist who had disappeared months ago. Her face was gaunt, her eyes weary yet determined. "Calm down, Blake. I'm not your enemy." Ethan stared at her, maintaining his defensive stance. "Who are you? And why should I trust you?" Ava lowered her hands, her voice steady but laden with emotion. "Because I know Victor Crane is the one who orchestrated everything to frame you. I also know you have no one on your side, but I have evidence, and we can only survive if we work together." Ethan looked into her eyes, recognizing the sincerity in her every word. but he also saw the fear she was trying to hide. What evidence? Ava opened an old backpack, pulling out a small hard drive and placing it in his hand. This contains everything I've gathered about Victor's corruption network. But it's not enough. We need the final piece to take him down. Outside the abandoned warehouse, the roar of car engines grew closer and closer. The headlights shone straight through the shattered windows, making the darkness inside the warehouse even more frightening. Ethan hid behind a pile of old crates, gripping a metal rod tightly in his hand, his eyes never leaving Ava. She was trembling but trying to stay calm as she checked the hard drive in her hand. "We're surrounded," Ethan whispered, his eyes scanning the doors. "We need to find a way out before they get in here." Ava nodded, though worry was etched on her face. "I don't have a weapon. If they come in, You'll be fine," Ethan interrupted, his tone firm yet reassuring. "I won't let anyone hurt you. We'll get out of here, both of us." The warehouse door was kicked open, and shadows poured inside. "Find them," a loud, cold, and ruthless voice commanded. Ethan squinted. It was Marcus, Victor's trusted enforcer, notorious for his brutality and blind loyalty. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Images of Max flashed in his mind. "You taught me patience, Max. I won't let you down." Heavy footsteps echoed across the warehouse floor. Rustling sounds came from every direction. Ethan and Ava held their breath, pressing deeper into the shadows. But then, a bark rang out from outside, strong and familiar. Ethan's heart clenched. "Max," he murmured. At that moment, Max's figure appeared, charging into the warehouse like a bolt of lightning. The dog barked fiercely, quickly biting one of the attacker's arms, causing him to scream in pain. Marcus turned, drawing his gun and aiming straight at Max. "No!" Ethan shouted, leaping from his hiding spot. He swung the metal rod in his hand, striking Marcus and knocking him down. Despite a leg injury, Max didn't stop attacking the other assailants. Meanwhile, Ava clutched the hard drive tightly and ran toward the back door. "Ethan, let's go!" she screamed, her eyes wide with panic. As the three of them dashed out of the warehouse, they were pursued by a group of mercenaries. Despite his pain, Max ran closely beside Ethan, his determined gaze seeming to say, "We won't give up." Ethan felt the unshakable loyalty from his four-legged companion, which gave him strength. The group reached an old bridge, where faint lights from the distant city flickered weakly. Ethan turned, facing the enemies closing in. "Go ahead," he said, pushing Ava forward. "Take the hard drive as far away as possible. Max and I will hold them off." "No, you can't do this alone," Ava protested, tears welling up in her eyes. "You have to," Ethan replied, his voice resolute. "You said we need to take Victor down. This is the only way." Ava choked back a sob, but then nodded. "Don't you dare die," she said before turning and running, carrying the only evidence that could save their lives. Ethan turned back to face the approaching enemies. Max stood by his side, limping but with eyes that still burned brightly. Ethan knelt down, stroking Max gently, his voice warm. "You're the reason I keep fighting, Max. If this ends today, I want you to know I'm proud to have you by my side." Max whimpered softly, nuzzling his head into Ethan's hand as if he understood every word. The sound of footsteps grew louder. Ethan stood up, ready for an uneven battle. "Come on," he growled, his voice echoing into the night. But before the enemies could close in, an unexpected sound rang out from the distance, a police siren. Flashing red and blue lights tore through the darkness. Ethan exhaled deeply, knowing they had just bought some time. He turned to Max, gently patting the dog's head. "Good job, buddy. We've survived again." The red and blue lights from the police car still flashed in the distance, but Ethan knew their presence didn't mean safety. In this city, not all police officers stood on the side of justice. He turned to Max, his loyal companion, now panting heavily, blood seeping from the wound on his leg. "Hang in there, Max. I won't let you get hurt anymore," Ethan said softly, his voice trembling with worry. Max let out a faint whimper, his eyes shining with absolute trust. Ethan quickly applied temporary bandages to Max, then crouched low to scan his surroundings carefully. The footsteps had stopped, and the atmosphere grew eerily silent. He felt something was off. "We have to move now," he whispered to Max. As Ethan and Max moved away from the old bridge, a slow clap echoed from the darkness ahead. Ethan froze, gripping the blood-stained iron bar he had taken from an earlier enemy. "I must say, you've truly impressed me, Ethan." A deep, raspy voice rang out. From the shadows, a tall man stepped forward. It was Caleb Blake, Ethan's younger brother, whom he thought had died in a tragic accident 10 years ago. But now, Caleb stood before him, dressed in a sleek black suit, a cold smile on his face. "Caleb," Ethan murmured, overwhelmed by mixed emotions. He couldn't believe his eyes. "Surprised, big brother?" Caleb sneered. "I'm still alive, and I guess by now you've figured out who's behind all of this." Ethan took a step forward, his eyes filled with pain and anger. "It was you? Why, Caleb? Why did you betray me, betray our family?" Caleb shrugged, as if it was all inconsequential. "Family? You're so naive, Ethan. Our family was never anything more than a burden. You were always the hero, while I was overlooked, forgotten. That's why I chose this path, power and money. This world has no place for your kindness." Ethan felt his anger boiling inside. He clenched his fists but couldn't take his eyes off Caleb. "What have you done?" Caleb smirked, his gaze icy. "I'd build an empire, Ethan, and Victor was just a pawn in my game. You'll never understand, but it's too late now. You should have stayed content in prison. But since you escaped, I'll have to end it all here and now." Caleb signaled, and from behind him, a group of mercenaries emerged, all armed to the teeth. Ethan glanced at Max, the dog still standing loyally by his side despite his injury. "You've saved me so many times, Max. Now it's my turn to save you. I won't let you fight alone." A fierce battle broke out. Ethan used every skill he had learned during his time as a police officer, but the enemies were too numerous. Max, injured as he was, kept attacking anyone who came close. Amid the chaos, Caleb stood watching, like a puppeteer controlling the scene. "You know, Ethan," he called out mockingly, "your efforts are futile. No one cares about the truth. They only want to believe what's easiest, and I'm the one who provides it." "Not everyone is like you, Caleb," Ethan shouted, his voice filled with rage. "You can't hide the truth forever." As the fight grew worse, Ethan saw an opportunity. He hurled a smoke grenade he had taken from an enemy, creating a thick cloud of mist. In the confusion, he pulled Max away from the fray and ran toward the lights of the distant city. Before disappearing into the night, he turned to look at Caleb one last time, his eyes brimming with pain and determination. "I won't stop, Caleb. I'll bring you down, no matter what it takes." Caleb just stood there, watching, the smile on his face slowly fading. "Then go ahead and try, brother," he muttered, his voice dripping with menace. The city was still shrouded in darkness as Ethan and Max dashed through the narrow alleys, their ragged breaths blending with the hurried footsteps echoing behind them. Max's wound continued to bleed, but the dog didn't stop. Ethan glanced down at Max, his heart aching with sorrow. "You're so strong, Max," Ethan whispered, his hand gently stroking the dog's back. "But I promise, once we get through tonight, I'll take you somewhere safe." Max responded with unwavering loyalty in his eyes. He whimpered softly but kept moving. Ethan led Max to an abandoned building where he knew they could temporarily hide. As they stepped into the dark room, he quickly surveyed the surroundings. The beam from his small flashlight illuminated peeling walls, evoking an eerie and cold atmosphere. He knelt beside Max, carefully unwrapping the makeshift bandage to check the wound. The bleeding had stopped, but the wound was still swollen. Ethan tore a piece from his shirt and re-bandaged the wound, his hands trembling with worry. "I'm sorry, Max," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I wish I could do more." Max licked his hand gently, as if to comfort him. As Ethan leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. A message from Ava appeared. "Meet me at the Southern Warehouse. I found what we need, but be careful. Caleb is hunting for you everywhere." Ethan read the message, a conflicting emotion rising within him. Caleb, the younger brother he once loved, was now his most dangerous enemy. He couldn't comprehend how someone so close could become so ruthless. Caleb made his choice, Ethan muttered, his eyes filled with determination. But I won't let you destroy anyone else. Ethan lifted Max in his arms, even though his muscles were exhausted. He knew Max needed rest, but they had no time. Hang in there, old friend. I'll get you out of this, I promise. They left the building, silently making their way through the dark alleys. Ethan felt the gaze of hunters watching him from the shadows. But whenever fear crept in, Max would stir slightly in his arms, as if to remind him they still had a goal to fight for. As they neared the southern warehouse, Ethan sensed something was off. The door was ajar, dim light spilling through the crack. He stopped, gently setting Max down, his eyes focused. "Ava," Ethan called softly. No response. Ethan stepped inside, each footfall like a heartbeat pounding in his chest. He saw Ava standing in the center of the room, clutching a thick folder. But what shocked him was Caleb standing right next to her, a gun pointed at her head. "Hello, Ethan," Caleb said, his tone dripping with mockery. "You've done well to make it here. But, as you can see, I'm always one step ahead of you." Ethan clenched his fists, his gaze burning with anger. "Caleb, let her go. You don't have to do this." Caleb chuckled coldly. "Don't have to?" "Ethan, you still don't get it. Ava is the final piece of my plan. She knows too much. And you," Caleb paused, his eyes cutting like blades. "You're just in the way." Max growled low, taking slow steps forward despite the pain from his wound. Caleb glanced down at the dog, raising an eyebrow. "Max is as loyal as ever." "Too bad. Do you think he can save you from this?" Ethan held out his hand, his voice low and steady. "Caleb, if you're truly my brother, stop this. Let me help you. Don't keep destroying yourself." For a brief moment, hesitation flickered in Caleb's eyes, but it vanished quickly. "It's too late, Ethan. Too late." As Caleb pulled the trigger, Max launched himself like a lightning bolt, sinking his teeth into Caleb's arm and causing the shot to miss. Ava screamed, falling to the floor, but Ethan quickly pulled her out of harm's way. "Max, no!" Ethan shouted, but Max didn't let go. Caleb struggled, shoving Max off and backing away. "Next time, Ethan," he said before disappearing into the darkness, leaving Ethan and Ava in the lingering horror. Ethan cradled Max in his arms, his eyes red as he saw the dog panting heavily, exhausted. "I owe you everything, Max," he said softly, his voice breaking. "I won't let you suffer anymore. I promise." Max whimpered, nuzzling his head against Ethan as if to say, "I'm still here. I'll always be here." The room fell eerily silent after Caleb vanished, leaving only the sound of Max's labored breathing in the tense atmosphere. Ethan held the dog tightly in his arms, his hands trembling as they touched the blood seeping from Max's wounds. "Max, hang in there, please," Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face. "You've saved me so many times. I won't lose you." Ava sat down on the floor, clutching the rescued folder with trembling hands. Her eyes were filled with guilt. "This is all my fault," she said, her voice hoarse. "If I hadn't dragged you into this, Max wouldn't have to suffer like this." Ethan turned to her, his gaze firm yet emotional. "No, Ava, this isn't your fault. The blame lies with Caleb and the rotten network he's running. We have to stop him. For Max, for everyone he's destroyed." Ethan stood up, lifting Max despite his own exhaustion. He glanced at Ava, signaling to her. "We can't stay here long. Caleb won't let this slide. We need to leave and find a way to get this folder to safety." Ava nodded, though worry was still etched on her face. "I know a place. A friend of mine can help decode the data on the hard drive. But Caleb won't stop. He'll chase us to the end. Then we'll stay one step ahead of him," Ethan replied, his voice low but resolute. They left the warehouse under the cover of thick darkness, moving through deserted alleys to avoid detection. Ethan felt each step like a battle against fatigue and despair. Max lay quietly in his arms, his breath shallow but his eyes still gleaming. "Hang in there, Max," Ethan murmured. "You're the reason I haven't given up. I won't let your pain be for nothing." When they reached the rendezvous point, they entered a small room in the basement of an old building. Inside, a middle-aged man with thick glasses sat in front of an array of computers. "You're Ava's friend?" Ethan asked cautiously. "Yes, I'm Martin," the man replied, casting a quick glance at Ethan and Max. "And you must be Ethan Blake, the man the whole city is hunting. Hand me the hard drive. I don't want to get dragged into this mess." Ava placed the hard drive on the table, her voice urgent. "Martin, we don't have much time. Caleb knows we have it. You need to start decoding it now." Martin shrugged and sat down, working with skilled precision. "I hope there's something worthwhile in here. I'm not risking my life for nothing." As Martin worked, Ethan knelt beside Max, gently stroking the dog. Ava handed him some bandages and antiseptic she had found in the room. "This is all I have," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "Thank you," Ethan replied softly. He began treating Max's wounds, each movement careful, but filled with worry. "You're the strongest fighter I know, Max. You have to pull through." Max whimpered faintly, his eyes meeting Ethan's as if to say he still had strength and the will to fight. Ethan lowered his head, tears falling onto Max's thick fur. "Ethan, come here." Martin's voice broke the silence. Ethan rose and approached the desk. Martin pointed at the computer screen, his expression tense. "I've just decrypted part of the data. There's a list of massive financial transactions, all linked to Caleb and his network. But what's more alarming is..." Martin paused, taking a deep breath. "He's preparing a major shipment, a deal that will solidify his power across the region. If we don't stop him, he'll become untouchable." Ethan clenched his fists, his eyes burning with anger. "We have to stop him." Martin shook his head. "It's not that simple. He has an entire army protecting him. Going in would be suicide." Ethan turned to look at Max, then at Ava. "I don't care how dangerous it is. Max has sacrificed too much. I owe it to him, to everyone Caleb has ruined. I won't let him keep running things." Ava looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "I'll go with you. Caleb destroyed my life, but I won't let him ruin the future of others." Ethan nodded, his gaze steady. "Then get ready. This will be our final battle." Night fell, bringing with it a tense silence before the storm. Ethan stood before the large map on the table, his eyes fixed on the markers indicating where Caleb was preparing to execute a major deal. It was an abandoned dock, surrounded by trees, with only one road leading in. "We have the element of surprise," Ava said, her voice soft but firm. "Caleb doesn't know we've decoded the data, but he won't let it slide if he finds out." Ethan nodded, his determination solid. "If we let him pull this off, he'll have enough resources to control the entire city. This is our one chance to stop him." He looked down at Max, the dog lying on the floor, resting after the previous battle. Max's wounds had been carefully bandaged, but Ethan knew the dog was exhausted. "Max, you've done more than enough," he said, stroking the dog's head. "I want you to stay here. I can't let you endure more pain." Max let out a low whine, as if protesting. The dog's bright eyes looked up at Ethan, full of determination. Ethan gave a bittersweet smile, his heart heavy with emotion. "All right, I know I can't stop you, but you have to promise me, if things get bad, you have to leave. I don't want to lose you." Max lowered his head, nudging Ethan's hand as if to agree. Their team consisted of only 3 people: Ethan, Ava, and Martin, who was handling remote surveillance. Under the faint moonlight, they approached the dock through the woods. Dim lights illuminated the dock, and Ethan could make out the silhouettes of armed guards patrolling the area. "There are at least a dozen of them," Ava whispered through the earpiece. "We can't take them head on." "We don't have to," Ethan replied. "All we need to do is destroy the shipment and secure evidence of the deal. That's the only way to bring Caleb down." They moved quietly among the rusted containers. Max led the way, his keen nose detecting threats before they got close. Ethan's heart clenched every time Max went ahead. The dog had endured so much but never stopped protecting him. As they neared the dock center, they saw Caleb standing on a raised platform, talking to a group of men. At his feet were large crates filled with cash and drugs. Ethan clenched his fists as he took in the scene. "Martin," he whispered into the radio, "can you activate the surveillance system to record this?" "Ready to go," Martin replied. "But you need to hurry. I've detected another team of mercenaries on their way. Ethan and Ava split up to place explosives around the crates. Max followed Ethan closely, his ears perked, ready to react to any danger. As Ethan prepared to set the final charge, a noise sounded behind him. "Don't move," a familiar voice commanded. Ethan turned to see Caleb standing there, gun aimed directly at him. "Do you think you can win, Ethan?" Caleb sneered. "You've always been weak. Your ideals make you a fool in this world. And you think you're strong because you chose this path." Ethan replied, his voice calm but icy. "You've betrayed everyone. Family, friends, even yourself." Caleb laughed, but a flicker of hesitation crossed his eyes. "Family? Ethan, I've been dead to my family for a long time." In that instant, Max lunged, sinking his teeth into Caleb's arm. The gun fell to the ground, and Ethan quickly tackled Caleb to the floor. "Run, Ava!" Ethan shouted. Ava activated the timer on the bombs and ran out with Max. The bombs detonated, blinding light tearing through the night, followed by deafening explosions. Ethan watched as Caleb was engulfed in the debris. This time he wouldn't escape. Ethan, Max, and Ava escaped the dock in the nick of time, the heat of the explosion still searing their backs. The morning light filtered through the branches, illuminating the misty dirt road. Ethan walked slowly through the forest, Max lying still in his arms, the small dog's body feeling heavier than ever. Max's wounds had been bandaged, but Ethan couldn't hide the worry in his eyes. Ava walked beside him, her face showing clear signs of exhaustion, yet her gaze remained resolute. On her shoulder was a bag containing the hard drive and documents they had salvaged from the dock. Each step they took was a reminder of the sacrifices they had made to uncover the truth. "We did it, Ethan," Ava said in a calm voice. "I just got word from Martin. The evidence we provided has been disseminated. Caleb and his network won't be able to hide anymore." Ethan stopped, looking at Ava with grateful eyes. "Thank you, Ava. Without you, I would never have made it here. But we both know this isn't over." They arrived at a small house nestled deep in the forest, where Martin was waiting. The house was simple but secure, with covered windows and a basic computer setup on a table. Martin stepped out, greeting them with a short nod. "The hard drive has been fully decrypted," Martin said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "What's inside doesn't just expose Caleb, but also the people behind him. They're part of an international network. We've stirred up a massive hornet's nest." Ethan laid Max down on a small bed, his eyes never leaving the dog. "Martin, will this be enough to end it all?" he asked, his voice low but filled with hope. Martin was silent for a moment, then shook his head. "Not entirely. We've only cut off one branch. But it's a start. The whole world will now know what happened. And Caleb, whether he lives or dies, will never escape this." Ethan sat beside Max, gently stroking the dog's smooth fur. Max opened his eyes, looking at Ethan with a tender, yet tired gaze. Ethan whispered, "Max, we've come such a long way. You've sacrificed so much. I don't even know how to thank you." Max whimpered softly, nuzzling his head into Ethan's lap. The dog seemed to convey that his loyalty was a given, requiring no thanks. Ethan felt an odd sense of peace in this moment, a connection deeper than words could ever express. Ava stepped closer, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You've fought for so long, Ethan. Both you and Max need rest. But I know you. You won't stop, will you?" Ethan smiled, a sad but determined smile. "I can't stop. Ava, Caleb is my brother. No matter what he's done, I want to see him pay, but I also want to understand why he became like this." "You don't have to do this alone," Ava said. "We've come this far together, and I'll continue to stand by you." Ethan nodded. "Thank you. We'll need all the help we can get to face what's coming." As night fell, Ethan sat by the window, watching the moonlight illuminate the tranquil forest. He thought about Caleb, about what they had gone through as children. Memories of Caleb laughing, running, and playing beside him filled his mind. "Caleb, you were once the little brother I cherished the most," he thought to himself. "I don't know why things turned out this way, but I'll find out the truth, no matter the cost." Max nestled against Ethan's legs, as if to remind him he was never alone. Ethan leaned down, placing a hand on the dog's head, whispering, "You and me, Max. We're not giving up, no matter how hard it gets, I promise." The sky was nearing dawn, and the atmosphere in the forest was unusually quiet. Ethan sat beside the small bed, watching Max as he slept soundly. The dog was still weak, but his breathing had become steadier. Ethan could feel the warmth from his loyal companion, and his heart sank with a sense of conflict. Ava stepped into the room, carrying a cup of hot coffee. She placed the cup on the table and sat down next to Ethan. "Martin just got the news," Ava said, breaking the silence. "Caleb is still alive. He's fled the city, but his network is collapsing. We can either continue chasing him or let the justice system handle the rest." Ethan nodded, but his eyes never left Max. "If I continue, I'll have to leave Max behind. He's been through too much. I'm not sure he can endure anymore." Ava looked at Ethan, her voice gentle but firm. "Ethan, you've done everything you could, but this isn't just about Caleb. People like him don't stop hurting others. If we stop now, more people will suffer." Ethan pondered, his gaze distant as if lost in old memories. He thought about Caleb, about the days when the two brothers grew up together in hardship, and about his brother's innocent smile when they were still naive. "Caleb is my blood, Ava," Ethan said softly. "But he chose the wrong path. If I don't stop him, more people will fall victim to him." Martin entered the room, holding a file of documents. "Ethan, here's all the information we have on Caleb and his remaining accomplices. If you want to continue, we can start planning right away. But I must warn you, if you go, there's no turning back." Ethan looked at the file on the table, then glanced at Max. The dog stirred slightly, his weary eyes opening to look at him with trust. Max seemed to be saying that no matter which path Ethan chose, he would always be by his side. Ethan stood up, looked at Ava and Martin, then out the window. "We've exposed the truth, but there's still so much to do. Caleb isn't just my brother. He's a symbol of everything wrong that we're trying to fight against. But I can't continue without thinking of Max." Ethan turned to the audience, as if speaking to himself. "What should I do? Continue the fight to take Caleb down, or stop to protect Max and let the law handle the rest? Which choice is the right one?" Ethan's story is not just a personal journey to fight against injustice, but also a reflection of the battles we all face in real life. It raises questions about loyalty, sacrifice, and individual responsibility when confronting wrongdoing. In today's world, we often face tough choices: to fight for change or to safeguard what matters most to us. Ethan is a symbol of determination and loyalty, but he also demonstrates that no one can do everything alone. What do you think Ethan should choose? Continue the fight to bring Caleb down, or stop to protect his loyal companion? Share your thoughts, because sometimes the right answer isn't always clear. The story closes, but the questions and lessons it brings continue to resonate, reminding us of the power of honesty, courage, and choice. What would you do if you were in Ethan's position?